Sometimes the most powerful love stories begin in the most unexpected places. Picture this. A successful businesswoman sits trapped in the worst date of her life, desperately searching for an escape, when salvation comes from the most unlikely source. The quiet custodian she barely notices each morning. But what she doesn't know is that this man, who works tirelessly in the shadows of her corporate world, has been secretly admiring her from afar for months. One moment of courage, one act of kindness, and one terrible date would set in motion a chain of events that would shatter every assumption about love, class, and what truly matters in life.
This is the true story of Marcus Thompson and Elena Rodriguez. Two souls from different worlds whose paths crossed in the most ordinary of places, yet created the most extraordinary of love stories.
What happens when the person who saves you turns out to be the one your heart has been searching for all along?
And what happens when society tells you that love like this isn't supposed to exist? Get ready for a journey that will challenge everything you think you know about love, destiny, and the power of seeing beyond the surface. Marcus Thompson adjusted his grey uniform and checked his watch as the elevator carried him to the 15th floor of the Meridian Corporate Tower. It was 6:30 in the morning, and the building hummed with the quiet energy that came before the storm of another business day. His reflection stared back at him from the polished elevator doors. A man in his early 30s with kind eyes and strong hands that had seen years of honest work. The doors opened with a soft chime, revealing the pristine hallway of the executive floor. Marcus pushed his cart forward, the wheels making barely a whisper against the marble floor. He had been cleaning this building for 3 years, and every morning followed the same routine. Empty the trash bins, vacuum the carpets, dust the furniture, and clean the windows. Simple work that he took pride in, even if most people never noticed him doing it. As he made his way down the hall, Marcus could see through the glass walls of the corner office where Elena Rodriguez was already at her desk. She arrived early every day, usually around 7, but today she was here even earlier than usual. Elena was the regional marketing director, a position she had earned through intelligence, determination, and countless late nights. At 28, she had already broken several glass ceilings in the corporate world. Marcus paused for a moment, pretending to organize his cleaning supplies while stealing a glance at Elena. She was beautiful, but it wasn't just her appearance that had caught his attention months ago. It was the way she treated everyone with respect, from the CEO to the security guard. It was how she stayed late to help her team meet deadlines, and how she remembered people's names and asked about their families. Elena had a warmth that seemed to light up every room she entered, even when she thought no one was watching. Elena sat at her desk, staring at her computer screen, but not really seeing the emails that filled her inbox. Her mind was elsewhere, dreading the evening that lay ahead. Her best friend Sarah had set her up on a blind date with someone she described as perfect husband material. The problem was that Sarah's idea of perfect and Elena's rarely aligned. But Elena had promised, and she was a woman who kept her promises, even when they led her into situations she'd rather avoid. She rubbed her temples, feeling the familiar tension headache that seemed to visit her more often these days. The corporate world was demanding, and while she loved her job, sometimes she felt like she was running on a treadmill that never stopped. Success had come at a price, and lately she wondered if that price was too high. Marcus finished cleaning the conference room next to Elena's office and moved closer to her workspace. Through the glass, he could see the stress lines on her face. He had noticed them appearing more frequently over the past few weeks. There was something about Elena that made him want to protect her, to somehow make her burden lighter, even though he knew his place in her world was invisible. As Marcus dusted the plants outside Elena's office, he accidentally knocked over a small decorative pot. The sound made Elena look up from her computer. Their eyes met through the glass wall, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. Elena offered him a small smile and a wave. Marcus felt his heart skip a beat as he waved back, then quickly returned to cleaning up the scattered soil. "Good morning, Marcus," Elena said as she stepped out of her office to help pick up the pieces of the broken pot. Marcus looked up, surprised that she knew his name. In 3 years of working in this building, very few executives had ever spoken to him directly, and certainly none had ever remembered his name.
Good morning, Miss Rodriguez.
"I'm sorry about the mess. I'll have this cleaned up right away," Marcus replied, his voice steady despite the rapid beating of his heart. "Please call me Elena, and don't worry about it. These things happen." She knelt down beside him, gathering the larger pieces of ceramic. "You know, I see you here every morning when I arrive. You do beautiful work. The office always looks perfect." Marcus felt warmth spread through his chest. "Thank you, Elena. I take pride in keeping things nice for everyone." As they worked together to clean up the mess, Elena found herself really looking at Marcus for the first time. He had gentle eyes and a quiet confidence that she found appealing. There was something calming about his presence, something that seemed to ease the constant tension she carried in her shoulders. "You're here very early today," Marcus observed, noting that it was still before 7. Elena sighed. "Big presentation this afternoon, and I have plans tonight that I'm not particularly excited about." "Bad plans?" Marcus asked, then immediately regretted the personal question. "I'm sorry, that's not my business." "No, it's okay," Elena said, standing up and dusting off her hands. "Just a blind date that my friend set up. She means well, but her idea of my perfect match and mine don't usually align." Marcus nodded, understanding, though inside he felt a strange pang of disappointment. Of course someone like Elena would be dating. She was intelligent, successful, and beautiful. He reminded himself that he was just the custodian, and she was an executive. Their worlds didn't overlap beyond these brief, polite interactions. "Well, I hope it goes better than you expect," Marcus said sincerely. "Thank you, Marcus. You're very kind." Elena smiled again, and Marcus felt that familiar flutter in his chest. As Elena returned to her office, Marcus continued his work, but his mind kept wandering to their conversation. He found himself hoping that Elena's date would be terrible, which made him feel guilty immediately after. She deserved happiness, even if it wasn't with him. The morning progressed with its usual rhythm. Employees began arriving, filling the quiet building with the sounds of ringing phones, clicking keyboards, and muffled conversations. Marcus moved through his duties efficiently, but his thoughts kept returning to Elena. He could see her through her office windows, preparing for her presentation, occasionally running her hands through her dark hair when she was concentrating. Around 10 o'clock, Marcus was cleaning the break room when he overheard Elena's assistant, Jennifer, talking to another employee about Elena's presentation. "She's been working on this for weeks," Jennifer was saying. "If this goes well, she's being considered for the vice president position. The pressure she's under must be incredible." Marcus felt a surge of admiration for Elena. He had no doubt that she would succeed. She had the kind of intelligence and determination that made success inevitable, but he also felt concerned for the stress she was obviously carrying. During his lunch break, Marcus sat in the small employee break room in the basement, eating a sandwich and thinking about Elena. He had never been the type to pursue women who seemed out of his league, and Elena was definitely out of his league, but there was something about her that made him want to try to be worthy of her attention. Marcus had grown up in a working-class family where education was a luxury they couldn't afford. He had started working right after high school to help support his mother and younger sister. The custodial job at Meridian Corporate Tower was honest work that paid well, and he was grateful for it. But sometimes, especially when he looked at Elena, he wondered what his life might have been like if he had been able to go to college. As the afternoon wore on, Marcus finished his regular duties and began the deep cleaning tasks that would keep him in the building until after 6, he told himself. It wasn't because he wanted to see Elena before she left for her date, but he knew he was lying to himself. At 5:30, Elena finally emerged from her office, looking both exhausted and relieved. The presentation must have gone well because she was smiling as she spoke to Jennifer about follow-up meetings. Marcus felt pride swelling in his chest, as if her success was somehow his own. Elena gathered her things and headed toward the elevator. As she passed Marcus, who was cleaning windows in the hallway, she stopped. "The presentation went very well," she said, as if she knew he had been wondering. "I'm so glad to hear that," Marcus replied, and his genuine happiness was evident in his voice. "Thank you. You know, talking to you this morning somehow helped me feel more centered before the presentation. There's something very calming about you, Marcus." Marcus felt his cheeks warm. "I'm honored to have helped, even in a small way." Elena looked like she wanted to say something else, but then glanced at her watch. "I should go. I need to get ready for this date." "I hope you have a wonderful evening," Marcus said, though the words felt hollow coming out of his mouth. As Elena walked away, Marcus watched her go, admiring the confident way she carried herself even when she was tired. He had no idea that in a few hours he would become the most important person in her evening. Elena left the building and drove to her downtown apartment, her mind still buzzing with excitement from the successful presentation. The CEO had been impressed, and there was talk of the promotion becoming official within the next month. She should have been celebrating, but instead, she felt that familiar emptiness that success sometimes brought. As she prepared for her date, Elena found herself thinking about her brief conversation with Marcus. There had been something in his eyes when he congratulated her on the presentation. a genuine happiness that seemed to have nothing to do with his own benefit. It was rare to find that kind of selfless joy in another person's success. She put on a black dress and heels, applied makeup and styled her hair, but her heart wasn't in it. The man Sarah had chosen for her was a successful lawyer named David Chen. On paper, he was perfect. Successful, educated, good-looking, and ambitious. But Elena had learned that men who looked perfect on paper often turned out to be disappointments in real life. Meanwhile, Marcus finished his evening duties and prepared to leave the building. As he rode the elevator down to the parking garage, he couldn't stop thinking about Elena's date. He hoped the man would treat her well, that he would see what a remarkable woman she was. But part of him also hoped that the man wouldn't be worthy of her. Though Marcus felt guilty for having such thoughts, as Marcus drove home to his small apartment across town, Elena was sitting in her car outside an upscale restaurant downtown, gathering the courage to go inside and meet David Chen. Neither of them knew that this evening would change both of their lives forever, or that fate was already setting in motion the events that would bring them together in the most unexpected way. Elena checked her reflection in the rearview mirror one more time, took a deep breath, and walked into the restaurant, completely unaware that the man she had been searching for had been right in front of her all along, cleaning the floors and windows of her world, while secretly hoping she might someday see him as more than just the invisible custodian. Elena walked into Romano's, one of the most expensive restaurants in the city, and immediately spotted David Chen at a corner table. Sarah had shown her his photo, and he looked exactly as she had described him. Tall, well-dressed, with perfectly styled hair and an expensive watch that caught the light from the restaurant's chandelier. He stood up as she approached, offering a smile that seemed practiced rather than genuine. "Elena, you look stunning," David said, extending his hand for a handshake rather than going for a more personal greeting. "Sarah told me you were beautiful, but she undersold you." Elena forced a smile and shook his hand, noting how his grip was firm to the point of being aggressive. "Thank you, David. It's nice to meet you." As they sat down, Elena noticed that David had already ordered wine without asking what she preferred. The bottle was expensive, she could tell, but it was a bold red that she didn't particularly enjoy. When the waiter came to pour her glass, David waved him away and poured it himself, filling her glass nearly to the brim. "I took the liberty of ordering the 2018 Barolo," David said, as if expecting praise. "It's one of the finest wines they have here. Cost me $300, but I believe in experiencing the best life has to offer." Elena nodded politely, though she was already irritated by his assumption and his need to mention the price. "That's very generous of you." The conversation started poorly and went downhill from there. David immediately launched into a monologue about his recent victory in a high-profile court case, describing in detail how he had destroyed the opposing counsel and secured a massive settlement for his client. His enthusiasm for the brutal aspects of his work made Elena uncomfortable, but every time she tried to change the subject, he steered it right back to his accomplishments. "The key to success in law," David continued, sawing aggressively at his steak, "is understanding that it's a war. You have to be willing to annihilate your opponent completely. Show no mercy. That's what separates winners from losers." Elena picked at her salad, which she had ordered in hopes of keeping the meal short. "I prefer to think of business as collaboration rather than warfare. In marketing, we find that working together usually produces better results than trying to defeat each other." David laughed dismissively. "That's very sweet, Elena. But that kind of thinking is why women often struggle to reach the highest levels of success. You have to be willing to be ruthless. Speaking of which, Sarah mentioned you work in marketing. That must be fun, playing with colors and slogans all day." Elena felt her jaw tighten. "Actually, I'm the regional marketing director for Meridian Corporation. I oversee strategic planning for a portfolio worth over $50 million. That's impressive for someone your age," David said, his tone patronizing. "I'm sure you work very hard, although marketing isn't quite as demanding as law. I regularly work 18-hour days. Last week, I billed 90 hours. My dedication is what's made me one of the youngest partners in my firm's history." As David continued to talk about himself, Elena's mind began to wander. She thought about her conversation with Marcus that morning, how he had genuinely celebrated her presentation success without needing to compare it to his own achievements. The contrast was stark and depressing. David ordered another bottle of wine without consulting her, despite the fact that Elena had barely touched her first glass. As the alcohol affected him, his voice grew louder and his stories became more boastful. Other diners were beginning to glance in their direction. "You know what your problem is?" David said, pointing his fork at her. "You're too nice. That's why you're still just a director instead of a VP. You need to learn to step on people if you want to get ahead. Take my assistant, for example. She made a mistake on a filing last week, so I made sure she understood that incompetence has consequences. Made her work all weekend to fix it, no overtime pay. That's how you teach people respect. Alina felt disgust rising in her throat.
David, that sounds like workplace harassment. It's called management, David shot back, his voice rising. But I wouldn't expect someone in marketing to understand real leadership.
You probably have team-building exercises and talk about feelings all day. The insults were bad enough, but what happened next made Elena realize that this date had crossed from uncomfortable into something much worse. David's phone rang, and instead of excusing himself or declining the call, he answered it right at the table. "Chen here," he barked into the phone. "What? No, that's unacceptable. I don't care if it's his daughter's birthday, he needs to be in the office tonight. Fire him if he refuses." Elena stared in shock as David spent the next 10 minutes loudly berating someone on the phone while their food grew cold. Other diners were openly staring now, and Elena wanted to disappear under the table. When David finally hung up, he didn't apologize. Instead, he grinned as if expecting praise. "That was my junior associate. These young lawyers think they can have work-life balance. I'm teaching him that success requires sacrifice." "David, that was incredibly rude," Elena said quietly. "You just ruined someone's family time over something that could have waited until tomorrow." "That's business, sweetheart," David said, using a term of endearment that made Elena's skin crawl. "When you're playing in the big leagues, you can't worry about people's feelings." Elena excused herself to go to the restroom, hoping to collect her thoughts and figure out how to end this disaster of an evening. As she walked through the restaurant, she could feel other diners' sympathetic looks. In the restroom, she stared at her reflection and wondered how Sarah could have thought she would be compatible with someone like David. When she returned to the table, David was on his phone again, this time loudly describing to someone how he was showing this marketing girl how a real professional operates. Elena felt humiliation wash over her as she realized other people could hear him talking about her dismissively. She sat down and quietly said, "David, I think we should call it a night." David held up one finger, indicating that she should wait while he finished his call. Elena sat there for another 5 minutes, feeling increasingly angry and embarrassed, before David finally hung up. "Sorry about that," he said without sounding sorry at all. "Where were we? Oh yes, I was telling you about how to be more aggressive in your career. You know what would really help you? You should come work for my firm. I could get you a job as a paralegal. The pay wouldn't be as good as what you're making now, but you'd learn how real professionals operate."
Elena stared at him in disbelief.
"You want me to leave my position as a director to become your paralegal? Think of it as an investment in your future," David said, completely missing her incredulous tone. "Working under me would teach you skills that marketing simply can't provide. Plus, it would give us more time to get to know each other." The implications of his suggestion made Elena feel sick. "David, I need to leave." "Come on, don't be dramatic," David said, reaching across the table to grab her wrist. "The night is young. I have a hotel room nearby. We could continue this conversation somewhere more private." Elena pulled her wrist away, shocked by his presumption. "Absolutely not. This date is over." David's expression darkened. "You're making a mistake, Elena. Do you know how many women would kill to be sitting where you are right now? I'm offering you opportunities you'll never get elsewhere." "I'm calling an Uber," Elena said, standing up and reaching for her purse. "Sit down," David commanded, his voice loud enough that several nearby tables turned to look. "You're being childish. I paid for an expensive dinner. The least you can do is finish it." Elena felt trapped. David was between her and the exit, and his voice was getting louder and more aggressive. Other diners were staring openly now, some looking concerned. The situation was escalating in a way that made Elena genuinely frightened. "I said sit down," David repeated, standing up and moving closer to her. "You're embarrassing both of us with this behavior." Elena looked around the restaurant desperately, hoping to catch the waiter's attention or find some other way out of the situation. David was clearly drunk, and his earlier charm had completely disappeared, replaced by something uglier and more threatening. "Please move away from me," Elena said as firmly as she could manage, though her voice was shaking. "Or what?" David challenged, his face flushed with anger and alcohol. "You'll call the police?" "Good luck explaining how you led me on all evening and then tried to run away when the check came." Elena realized with growing alarm that David wasn't going to let her leave quietly. His behavior was becoming increasingly aggressive,
and she could see that other diners were uncomfortable but seemed reluctant to intervene. She felt completely alone and trapped, with no idea how to escape the situation safely. What Elena didn't know was that at that exact moment, Marcus Thompson was 3 blocks away, leaving the small diner where he ate dinner most nights. He had been thinking about her all evening, wondering how her date was going, and hoping that David Chen was treating her with the respect she deserved. Marcus walked slowly toward his car, still thinking about Elena's smile that morning and the way her eyes had lit up when she talked about her successful presentation. He had no idea that in less than 5 minutes he would receive the most important phone call of his life. One that would give him the chance to be Elena's hero in a way he never could have imagined. As Elena stood frozen at her table, trapped between an increasingly aggressive David and a restaurant full of strangers who seemed unwilling to help, fate was already putting the pieces in place for her rescue. The man who had been quietly admiring her from afar was about to step out of the shadows and into her life in the most dramatic way possible. Elena took a deep breath and prepared to push past David, knowing that she might be walking into a confrontation that could turn physical. She had no way of knowing that help was already on the way, in the form of a gentle custodian with kind eyes and a heart full of courage that even he didn't know he possessed. Marcus was unlocking his car door when his phone rang. He almost didn't answer it since the number wasn't in his contacts, but something made him pick up at the last second. "Hello," he said, settling into the driver's seat. "Marcus, thank God you answered." The voice was familiar, though strained. It took him a moment to realize it was Jennifer, Elena's assistant. "Jennifer, is everything okay?" "I need your help," Jennifer said urgently. "I know this might sound crazy, but Elena is in trouble. She's on a date at Romano's restaurant, and the guy she's with, Marcus, I'm worried about her." Marcus felt his heart rate spike. "What do you mean? What kind of trouble?" "My friend Lisa works there as a hostess," Jennifer explained rapidly. "She just called me because she recognized Elena from when she came to our office Christmas party. She said, Elena looks terrified, and the man she's with is being loud and aggressive. Lisa said other customers are starting to complain, but the guy won't let Elena leave. She tried to go, but he kept blocking her way." Marcus was already starting his car. "Where's Romano's?" "Downtown on 5th Street, near the Marriott." "Marcus, I called you because I didn't know who else to contact. Elena mentioned this morning that you two had talked, and she said something about how you made her feel safe. I know it's asking a lot, but I'm already on my way," Marcus interrupted, pulling out of the parking lot faster than he had ever driven before. "Text me the exact address." As Marcus navigated through downtown traffic, his mind raced with worry and determination. He barely knew Elena personally, but the thought of her being frightened or threatened made him feel protective in a way he had never experienced before. It didn't matter that he was just a custodian and she was an executive. It didn't matter that they existed in different social circles. Someone he cared about needed help, and that was all that mattered. Meanwhile, at Romano's, the situation was continuing to deteriorate. David had consumed most of the second bottle of wine by himself, and his behavior was becoming more erratic and aggressive. When Elena had tried to leave money for her portion of the meal and walk away, he had grabbed her arm hard enough to leave marks. "You're not going anywhere," David said, his grip tightening on her arm. "We're going to finish this conversation like adults."
"Let go of me," Elena said firmly, though her voice was shaking.
"You're hurting me. I'm trying to help you," David said, his words slurring slightly. "You just don't understand what's good for you. Women never do. That's why you need a strong man to guide you." Elena looked around the restaurant desperately. The hostess, Lisa, was watching with obvious concern, but the manager seemed reluctant to intervene with what appeared to be a couple's dispute. Other diners were whispering and staring, but no one was stepping forward to help. "Please," Elena said quietly, "just let me go home." "Home?" David laughed harshly. "The night is just getting started. I told you, I have a room at the Marriott. We're going to go there and continue this conversation properly." Elena felt panic rising in her chest. David's intentions were becoming clearer and more threatening by the minute. She tried to pull her arm free, but his grip only tightened. "If you don't let go of me right now, I'm going to scream," Elena warned. "Go ahead," David challenged. "Make a scene. See how that works out for your professional reputation. I have friends at every major corporation in this city. One word from me, and your career is over." Elena realized with growing horror that David wasn't just drunk and aggressive, he was calculating. He was using his professional connections as leverage to keep her trapped. She felt more frightened and alone than she had ever felt in her life.
Outside the restaurant, Marcus was circling the block looking for a parking space. Finally, he gave up on finding something legal and pulled into a loading zone, not caring about the potential ticket. As he hurried toward the restaurant entrance, he could see through the large windows that there was some kind of disturbance near one of the corner tables. Marcus pushed through the front door and immediately spotted Elena. Even from across the crowded restaurant, he could see the fear in her eyes and the way she was trying to pull away from the man gripping her arm. Something primal and protective surged through Marcus's chest. Without stopping to think about the consequences, Marcus strode across the restaurant toward Elena's table. Other diners moved out of his way, sensing his determination and purpose. The hostess, Lisa, saw him coming and pointed toward Elena's table, recognizing that this must be the help she had hoped would arrive. "Excuse me," Marcus said in a calm but firm voice as he approached the table. "Elena, are you all right?" David looked up at Marcus with obvious disdain. "Who the hell are you? This is a private conversation." "I can see that Elena wants to leave," Marcus said, his eyes fixed on David's hand gripping Elena's arm. "I think you should let her go." Elena stared at Marcus in shock and overwhelming relief. She had no idea how he had found her or why he was there, but she had never been happier to see anyone in her entire life. "Marcus," she said, her voice filled with gratitude, "thank you for coming." David looked between Marcus and Elena with growing anger. "You called for backup? That's pathetic. And this is who you called? Your janitor boyfriend?" Marcus felt the insult hit home, but he didn't let it show on his face. "Sir, I'm going to ask you one more time to let Elena go. She clearly wants to leave." "And I'm telling you to mind your own business," David snarled, standing up but not releasing Elena's arm. "This doesn't concern you." Marcus stepped closer, and Elena could see the controlled strength in his posture. Despite being several inches shorter than David, Marcus somehow seemed more intimidating. There was something in his quiet confidence that suggested David would be making a serious mistake if he pushed this confrontation further. "Actually, it does concern me," Marcus said evenly. "Elena is my friend, and I don't let my friends get hurt."
Your friend? David laughed mockingly.
"You're the help. She doesn't even know your last name." "It's Thompson," Elena said quietly, surprising both men. "Marcus Thompson. And he's twice the man you are." David's face flushed red with anger and embarrassment. "You choosing the janitor over me? Do you have any idea what I could do for your career? What he could do for you? Nothing. He's nobody." Marcus felt the words sting, but he kept his focus on Elena. "Would you like me to drive you home?" he asked her gently.
"Yes," Elena said immediately. "Please."
"She's not going anywhere with you,"
David said, his grip on Elena's arm becoming painful.
"Elena, stop being ridiculous. Send your white knight away so we can finish our evening like civilized people." Marcus looked at David's hand on Elena's arm, then back at David's face. When he spoke, his voice was still calm, but there was steel beneath the surface. "Sir, you have exactly 3 seconds to let go of her arm before this becomes a much bigger problem for you."
"Are you threatening me?" David demanded.
"Do you know who I am? I could have you arrested for harassment." "1," Marcus said quietly. David tightened his grip on Elena's arm, causing her to wince. "You don't scare me. You're just some minimum wage loser who thinks he's a hero." 2, Marcus continued, taking another step forward. Elena could see that other diners were now openly watching the confrontation. The manager was making his way across the restaurant, finally deciding to intervene, but Marcus wasn't waiting for official help. "You want to count to 3? David sneered. "Go ahead. What are you going to do? I'll have you in jail before midnight." 3, Marcus said, and then moved with surprising speed. Marcus didn't hit David, which surprised everyone watching, including David himself. Instead, he grabbed David's wrist with one hand and applied pressure to a specific point that immediately caused David to release Elena's arm with a yelp of pain. "That's a pressure point I learned in the army," Marcus said calmly, not releasing David's wrist. "I can apply just enough pressure to make your hand completely numb. Or I can apply a little more and break something. Your choice." David stared at Marcus in shock, suddenly realizing that he had badly misjudged the quiet custodian. "You were in the army?" 3 tours in Afghanistan, Marcus replied without boasting. "Served with honor before I came home to take care of my mother. Now, Elena is going to leave and you're going to sit down and finish your wine quietly. Are we clear?" David nodded quickly and Marcus released his wrist. Elena stood up immediately, grabbing her purse with shaking hands. "The ladies' meal is on me," Marcus said to the approaching manager, pulling out his wallet. "No," Elena said immediately. "Marcus, you don't have to." "I want to," Marcus said firmly, placing $40 on the table. "It's my pleasure." As they walked toward the exit together, Elena could hear David calling after them, his voice a mixture of anger and humiliation. "Elena, you're making the biggest mistake of your life. That guy will never be able to give you what you need. You'll regret this." Elena didn't look back. As they stepped outside into the cool evening air, she felt like she could breathe freely for the first time in hours. "My car is right here," Marcus said, gesturing toward his modest sedan in the loading zone. "Would you like me to drive you home, or would you prefer to call someone else?" Elena looked at Marcus, really seeing him for perhaps the first time. He had just rescued her from a frightening situation with courage and grace, never raising his voice or losing his composure. He had treated her with more respect in 10 minutes than David had shown her all evening. "I would very much like you to drive me home," Elena said. "Marcus, how did you know I was in trouble?" As Marcus opened the car door for her, he explained about Jennifer's call and her friend Lisa, the hostess. Elena felt overwhelmed by the realization that people she worked with cared enough about her to call for help, and that Marcus had dropped everything to come to her aid. "Thank you," Elena said as they settled into the car. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't shown up." "You don't need to thank me," Marcus replied, starting the engine. "I'm just glad you're safe." As they drove through the city streets toward Elena's apartment, both of them knew that something significant had shifted between them. Marcus was no longer just the invisible custodian, and Elena was no longer just the untouchable executive. They were two people who had shared something real and meaningful, and the possibility of what might grow from this moment hung in the air between them like a promise. The drive to Elena's apartment began in comfortable silence, both of them processing what had just happened. Elena found herself stealing glances at Marcus as he drove, noticing things about him that she had never paid attention to before. His hands on the steering wheel were strong but gentle, the same hands she had seen carefully dusting and cleaning every morning. There was a quiet competence in the way he navigated through traffic, checking his mirrors and signaling properly, treating even this simple task with the same care he brought to everything else. "I had no idea you were in the military," Elena said finally, breaking the silence. Marcus glanced at her briefly before returning his attention to the road. "It's not something I talk about much at work. People sometimes make assumptions about veterans, and I prefer to let my work speak for itself." "What did you do in the army?" "I was a medic," Marcus replied. "Spent most of my time taking care of people, which I guess isn't too different from what I do now. Different kind of cleaning up, but the goal is the same, making sure people are safe and comfortable." Elena felt a wave of respect wash over her. She had misjudged Marcus completely, seeing only his current job and never bothering to learn about the man behind the uniform. 3 tours must have been difficult. "It had its challenges," Marcus said quietly. "But it also taught me what's really important in life. When you see people at their worst and their best, when you hold someone's life in your hands, it changes your perspective on what matters." They stopped at a red light, and Elena found herself really looking at Marcus's profile. There were small lines around his eyes that she hadn't noticed before, evidence of experiences that ran much deeper than she had ever imagined. "Is that why you became a custodian?" she asked gently. "After everything you experienced overseas," Marcus was quiet for a moment, considering how much to share. "When I came back, my mother was diagnosed with diabetes complications. She needed someone to help her manage her care, and my younger sister was just starting college. The custodial job at Meridian offered good health insurance and steady hours. It let me take care of my family while they needed me." Elena felt a knot form in her throat. While she had been climbing the corporate ladder, focused on her own success and advancement, Marcus had been quietly sacrificing his own ambitions to care for his family. The contrast made her feel shallow and self-absorbed. "How is your mother doing now?" Elena asked. "Better, thank you for asking. She's learned to manage her condition well, and my sister just graduated from nursing school last month. She wants to be a pediatric nurse." The pride in Marcus's voice was unmistakable. "You must be very proud of her, and she must be grateful for the sacrifices you made to help her get through school." Marcus smiled, the first genuine smile Elena had seen from him all evening. "She tells me all the time that she's going to pay me back someday, but that's not why I did it. Family takes care of family. That's just how I was raised." As they continued driving, Elena found herself seeing the city differently through the passenger window.
She usually drove this route thinking about work, conference calls, and quarterly reports.